Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining me. This is designed to be a little bit more of an informal conversation, and I'll make a few comments and we'll turn it open for questions. And first, I am pleased to be joined by Dr. Cheryl May, who is Director of the School Safety Center, but also of the Criminal Justice Institute. And I'll make some comments about some of her work here shortly. First, I did meet with legislative leadership today about the potential for a special session to give additional tax relief to Arkansans. This is important to consider in this time because the rising costs of fuel and the increasing costs of food are hurting Arkansas families. The discussions that we had are based upon the best form of tax relief that we can enact that would help Arkansans. And I want to listen to more members of the General Assembly, and we want to arrive at a consensus, but that is what I consider an important need that we have, and we had that discussion with leadership today. We also discussed the potential for school safety and security as being considered as a potential agenda item for that session. And right now, parents are certainly worried and concerned and asking themselves the questions as to whether my child can safely go to school. And school board members and school districts are reviewing their security plans, their safety plans, and seeing how it needs to be tightened, what more we can do. And that's the right consideration that they have. But as a state, we need to be in a position to support our local school districts in terms of their safety enhancement efforts. It is a constitutional responsibility of the state of Arkansas to assure that we have a quality school system, but that we also have a safe school system. And so I am recommending that part of the surplus be used for increased school safety efforts. This could be in the form of a grant program. I want to work with the legislature to define this, but it is important in my mind that if we have a special session for tax relief, that we also have on the agenda the need for using part of the surplus for school safety. And it's important to emphasize too, and I think everybody in Arkansas needs to understand this, that we're not starting school safety efforts because of what we saw in Uvalde. In fact, it was in 2018 that I commissioned the Arkansas School Safety Commission, which was bringing together leading experts in education and security to look at our system, what improvements can we make, what do we need to do. And so that started in 2018. That commission was led by Dr. Cheryl May, who made a very comprehensive report to me. And the work of the commission has been significant. It hasn't sat on a shelf. In fact, most of the recommendations that were made have been adopted or being worked on. The recommendations include increasing school counseling access, to improving physical security of the schools, to prevention efforts that we can have, and it includes increasing the number of armed presence in the different schools across Arkansas. Again, most of these have been adopted, but as a result of what we've seen and the time that has lapsed, it is important that this commission reconvene and to review where we are now, the recommendations in 2018, the progress that we have made, and to make any additional comments or recommendations. And so I've asked Dr. May to reconvene the School Safety Commission for that purpose. I expect this to be a quick review and a quick turnaround because the substantive work has been done, but I need an update in order to make sure that we address the needs of school safety as any agenda item that might come up in any special session in the future. And so with that, I'd like to ask Dr. May to comment, if you will, on the work of the commission and what the status of those recommendations are.
Thank you, Governor. And most importantly, thank you for the leadership on this very, very important issue. We had 19 commission members. We worked for 9 months and ended up coming up with 30 recommendations. As the governor said, we've never stopped working on these issues. There have been a lot of individuals, superintendents, legislators, school staff, members of the Division of Elementary and Secondary Education, our staff at the Criminal Justice Institute. We work very, very hard to try to meet as many of these recommendations as we can. Back in 2019, there were a couple of bills that were passed into law. Act 190 increases the amount of time that school counselors should spend with their students, changing it to 90%. Also, Act 629 allowed school districts to form their own institutional police departments. And then during this last session, Acts 551, 620, 622, and 648 were passed that focuses on comprehensive school safety audits, emergency operation plans, lockdown drills, requires youth mental health first aid for school counselors, and then the other set of bills focuses on school resource officers and training requirements and memorandum of understanding. So I think we've made a tremendous amount of progress. And once again, Governor, thank you so much for your leadership on this issue.
Thank you, Dr. May. And one thing I hope the commission looks at as it's reconvened is also the importance of audit, checks, and recurring training. Whenever you can have the best laid plans, but if there's not the audits, the performance indicators, and the actual adoption of good policy, then we're going to have vulnerabilities, as you've seen in Uvalde, even though we're waiting additional information. And so I think that will be a good point of conversation with the commission as well. I have spent a lot of time on the issue of school safety, both at the national level, where I was commissioned and had leading experts, including the Secret Service, go to school districts across the United States. And so I've seen school safety from just about every different vantage point. So I was pleased to be able in 2018 to have this commission be so successful here in Arkansas as well. With that, we're happy to turn it open to any questions.
I know you said that you want to increase school safety with that surplus, but what exactly would that look like?
Well, there's a couple different approaches to it. First of all, you're looking at what amount of money. And that's one thing. I want to put a meaningful amount of money that would go into perhaps a grant program that would support the efforts of the local school districts to enhance safety. I would think a healthy grant program would be in the neighborhood of $50 million. And so the other issue that would have to be considered is whether security should be part of the formula for how much we give to each school district per student. And if you put in a security factor in there, that would mean recurring additional funds for the school districts where they need to hire an SRO, school resource officer, or other types of enhancements. That's up to the legislature, and let me emphasize, any change in the formula is a legislative responsibility, but that's something I know that they will be looking at in the future. But in the immediacy, and we're looking at the summer months now, if we can put together a grant program and put resources into it, then that's going to be very, very beneficial for our school as they plan for safety next year and give confidence more to our parents. Yes?
So I wonder, instead of putting the responsibility of the societal ill of gun violence on our schools, why not address the root of the problem, which is the ubiquity of gun access for everyone?
Because I've looked at it from every different standpoint, and if you're not going to be able to fully protect schools without having school safety measures in place. And so that, to me, is something that is what everybody should agree upon. That should not be a debatable issue. It should be a responsibility. Whenever you look at the other issues that you speak about, and that is access to firearms in our society, that's not going to change no matter what law we pass. And so, our focus should be on school safety.
So I've heard you say this week that you were open to considering maybe some changes to age requirements as far as availability of firearms. Is that true?
What I've said is, in reference to AR-15 style weapons, that there can be an honest conversation as to whether that should be accessed by those 18 and whether the age limit should be lifted to 21. I've said there should be a conversation about that. I do think that's important after we've seen what happened in Uvalde, but there's challenges there. One, California passed a similar law, and it was struck down by the courts as unconstitutional. And so we need what we have to do smartly, and we have to do working together and thinking it through as to whether it will make a difference and whether it's consistent with our Second Amendment liberties. And so that's a conversation that we should have, but what we are together on is simply school safety, and that's our first responsibility.
Experts have, sorry.
Would you like this grant to go to more physical means like doors, upgraded security facilities at the school, or is this going to go towards like SR officers, things like that?
Well, you're looking at a grant program is by its nature one-time funding. And so that's for specific security needs. So it could be utilized for a better technology, better cameras, altering physical security for one point of entry, things like that. That's a one-time investment. The ongoing recurring needs for school resource officers, that has to be put into the budget so you don't have them there for 6 months or a year and they're gone because of budget constraints. That's an important distinction, and so the grant program would be for more one-time funding capital needs. Yes.
Experts have said that hardening of school safety, like adding more SROs and metal detectors, haven't shown too many concrete results yet. And Uvalde actually got its own grant for school safety in 2019 for $70,000 for that district. So do you have any concerns, or how could this grant, I guess, continue to protect Arkansas schools if Uvalde got a similar grant and still saw the atrocities that we saw?
Well, I mean, every plan that you have is subject to human error. And that's why you have to build in checks and balances and layered security. And we're still learning about what happened in Uvalde. So let's wait. More facts will come to the table. In fact, I think there'll be a lot more facts come to the table that will be instructive to us as we make decisions. But, there is a deterrent fact as well. I have no doubt in my mind but that an armed presence at schools is a deterrent factor and can save lives. We've seen that through history from the school in Pearl, Mississippi, where the gunman was shot, as a result of someone having a firearm. And there's other illustrations of it. So the investment in safety does make a difference, and I'm confident of that. Yes.
When I spoke to Dr. May, she said one of the things that the state needs is a statewide network to report potential threats. Is that something you would push the legislature to adopt or try to get?
We've discussed this, and I believe Dr. May illustrated this, that another state is a similar statewide call-in framework. That's something I would like the commission to look at. We want to see if it's could be of utilitarian value, and we want to get the view of the schools. Certainly you want to have a climate in which students or parents, when they see indications of mental illness or threats, that is communicated and acted on quickly. And whatever the communication device that is helpful in that regard, we certainly want to look at.
Can I ask a non-gun related question?
You may. please.
Do you actually have
Trying to arrive at a consensus on it. And so just because I haven't laid it all out publicly doesn't mean I have not advocated for a particular outcome. So we got work to do. But the legislature has been working in good faith, and I think we can arrive at a consensus. One thing that I do believe that I would be supportive of, with where we are in our revenue picture now, with our surplus, but also with what we project in the future, we can accelerate those tax cuts. And if we did that, that would give immediate benefit to every Arkansas taxpayer. They would be able to adjust their withholding tables quickly. And so there is a broader agreement on that particular outcome. I think the question is a few other items that's potential and what else we need to do.
so you have I get the impression there's other spending items that you want to do that you haven't shared with us, but you've shared with legislators. I'm hearing money potentially for a new crime lab building, a new building at UAMS. Is this all part of your agenda, or is it somebody else's agenda? Or?
Those are all options that are on the table. And, you know, there's a good case to be made that these are items that ought to be saved to the next general session. They're not special session items. And so that's all fair. And so there's been no determination made on those items as to whether they should be funded or when they should be funded. And there's also, Mike, a nervousness about the future economy. And so we do want to make sure we have sufficient amount in reserves so that if there is uncertainty in the economy in the future, that we can adjust to it and make sure we can meet our commitment to state services.
So is the goal a special session August, September?
Well,
We've been talking about this for several weeks now. And
we have. It could be July, August, if we arrive at a consensus on what needs to be done. But we still have some work to do before I'll commit to a special session for sure. But clearly there is a need for one.
Governor, we have about $800 million in ARPA funds in a bank right now. How do you want to spend that money?
We have received our second tranche of the federal dollars called American Rescue Plan funds. That needs to be used for broadband, infrastructure in our state, as well as workforce education. And now that we have the money, we're looking more closely at getting ready to present those plans on spending to the legislature for their review.
Say broadband infrastructure or broadband and infrastructure?
Well, and is what I said, and because the infrastructure is much wider than simply broadband. There are irrigation projects that are important for our conservation efforts in Arkansas, for our increasing the utilization of surface water in our irrigation. And so those are priorities for me. In addition, we have a lot of water projects that are from cities and counties across the state. They exceed the amount of money that we have. And so it really comes down to how much can we allocate to each of those areas. And I have in my mind how they should be allocated out, but there's a lot of other people who have a voice in that. But now that we have that money, I do want to accelerate the presentation of those plans to the legislature, and hopefully we'll be in a position to do that in the near future.
So, one more non-related question. I've also heard that teacher salaries might be part of the mix.
Same answers I gave before, that there's ongoing discussions, and we'll see where that goes. Whenever you look at the role of teachers, I've always advocated for increased teacher salaries, but we've got to look at the entire budget picture and the uncertainty of the economy in the future, make a judgment as to what we can do and when we can do it. Is there yes, back to the back?
Governor, with the mass, with another mass shooting happening so close in Tulsa yesterday, is there a little bit of concern as to if or when this could ever happen on that magnitude here in Arkansas? And then how would you respond to that if it were to happen in Arkansas?
Well, I briefly looked at the facts, which means you need to wait and get more facts in a couple of days because they could change. But this was a 45-year-old man who goes in and murders his physician, and then he commits suicide. I mean, this is tragic. And whenever you look at the role that medical professionals play and have sacrificed for our health, and that's an outcome, it's just sad. And clearly, whether he's been diagnosed as mentally ill or not, that is a form of mental illness whenever you react in that way. And so to me, it focuses once again on, it's a broad challenge that we have, from mental health issues to societal anger and rage. And we've got to look at that as a society and recognize, first of all, these are issues that have to be dealt with the heart, and the government doesn't deal with heart issues very well. And so this is the community, it's families, it's churches. We all have to look at this. The key thing is that we work together and try to reach some solutions and understand the depth of the challenge that we face in our communities. And mental health is a big part of it. And that's one of the reasons that we enhanced the direct counseling in our schools. We want counselors to be counseling, understanding the challenge it is. That's one of the reasons that we want to invest more in our rural hospitals in mental health resources. This is a challenge we face in society. We've got to do better.
You've talked about increased safety and mental health resources, but I'm curious, in the wake of these mass shootings, if you're considering any limitations on, increased background checks for gun ownership or ammunition limits, anything like that related to guns.
We need to have some patience here. I really think the effort that the bipartisan group of senators is doing is important. And I've had a conversation with some of the leaders in that, and I believe, one, their efforts are genuine. They're going to be looking at background checks and the thoroughness of those, because we don't want to have those that are convicted felons getting the firearms. We want good prosecution of those that try to get them unlawfully, and we certainly don't want those that have severe mental health issues acquiring them. The challenge is, how do we get there? I think we're all studying the Florida law and looking at whether that's been effective or not in terms of severe risk protection orders. And so that will continue to be part of the conversation. And I think this group of senators that will be looking at this, they're going to come out with some recommendations, but they're looking for common ground. So let's see what they come up with.
But would you consider any legislation for Arkansas?
No, when I talk about the special session of the legislature, school safety, I would expect to be on the agenda. Nothing more in reference to any of the other issues that you've raised.
When you speak of school safety on a national level and seeing the different security measures that they did there, can you speak about Arkansas school districts? Because you have some schools that have the latest state-of-the-art technology, key access, you name it. And then you have other school districts where, a person can literally walk in through the back door. What's your perspective on Arkansas school districts and as far as just the range of security measures? And is this grant supposed to levelize, have a level playing field so that they're all at a certain standard of security measures that students and teachers and staff can feel safe?
That's a great question. And these are sometimes expensive items. One, every school district, rich or poor, needs to do an independent security assessment. That costs money. And so we want to be of assistance to them. This is one avenue to do it by this type of a grant program. But in terms of how we're doing in comparison to school districts across the country, I think we're actually doing very well because we started early on this, and the school districts responded. They did not sit back, but every school board member I talked to, every superintendent, every principal, they have taken this very, very seriously, and they've used creative solutions and solutions that are unique to their school district. You know, sometimes they can't afford an armed police officer in the school, so they become commissioned. They go through training themselves if someone is willing to be on guard at the school. They've limited the access points as well. We need to audit that and to make sure that they have self-locking mechanisms, that they're following the rules to keep the children safe. So there's more work to be done, and we have to be consistently diligent on the school safety side of this, else we will break down and children will be at risk. Did you have anything to add to that, Dr. May? Okay.
One thing we know for sure is that most school shootings are done with weapons that belong to a family member or friend of the shooter. I'm wondering if possibly some safe storage laws might be on the table, and if not, barring that, or in addition to that, if some of these funds might be used to provide gun safes, gun locks, gun safety education to members of the school community.
I think Arkansas parents, by and large, do a very good job of safety training, but there can be some gaps. You've seen, as you indicated, instances of a gun being stolen, whether it's by a criminal or by somebody that should not be possessing that firearm. So that is something we need to continue to emphasize in terms of training and safety and firearm education. Should there be mandates that require that? That's always a burden on citizens, but we can look at whatever issue that can be presented. I know that some of the storage issues might be looked at by the Senate Bipartisan Committee, and we can see that. Dr. May, did you have anything on that?
No, sir.
Okay. All right, one more question, perhaps.
You mentioned earlier about the mental health outside the schools and some of the need for assistance with rural health. I know for some areas there's like one mental health facility per county or per 1 to 2 counties. Have you been able to, I guess, have any idea of using some of these ARP funds to assist some of these mental health facilities, or figure out ways to get more mental health facilities in these rural areas?
Well, there's a great deal of need for enhanced efforts in mental health and also addiction services in the rural areas of our state. So the answer is yes. We're looking at that. I hope that we can provide some additional funding to help in those in those areas. And we actually also have a specific plan that we presented to the Biden administration called 360 Homes, in which we provide additional funding to our rural hospitals to enhance maternal care, to improve addiction counseling, and some at-risk behavior. So this would not only help our rural hospitals, but it will help in the services that you indicated, including mental health services. So we're looking at every avenue to increase that, because we know there is a gap and a tremendous need.
Is a presidential run still on the table? You've been making a lot of national appearances lately. Any clarification on that?
No, but thank you for asking. Obviously, there's a lot of talk about that. We take it a step at a time. Everybody in Arkansas needs to know this is my first commitment, but we are doing some testing of the waters, and because I'm concerned about the direction of our country, the issues that impact our families, and I believe some conservative leadership that is also common sense is important. We'll see if, when I offer that, it's a good response or not. Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry. Shaylin drew my attention. We might have some people remotely. Do we have any questions remotely? We'll get to you earlier next time. All right, thank you.